Hello, my name is Travis Dow, and this is our video demonstration for app project number 1. This is my group right here. So for our application, we just enter into main here, and the first thing we do is call this new clock function, which we're using to set the clock frequency to 32 kilohertz. Then we call this IO initialization function, and that's just going to initialize the digital input-output pins that we're going to be using for the push buttons and the LED. Next, we're just going to initialize these this CN interrupt, which is going to be used for the push buttons as well. And then we're going to call this timer initialization function, and that's going to initialize the two timer interrupts we're going to be using for this application. So the first one, the T2 interrupt, is going to be used for the 1 second delay applications, and the T3 interrupt is going to be used for the 3 second delay application. So next, we just initialize two global variables, minutes and seconds, to 0, and those are going to be used to hold the values for the timer when it gets set. Then we enter into this continuous while loop where we just put the hardware into idle to conserve power. And that's going to stay that way until a CN interrupt is triggered when somebody interacts with one of the push buttons. And so when that happens, depending on which push button is pressed, the state's going to change. So if PB1 is pressed and held down, it's going to increment the minutes on the timer and then set them by calling the set time function. And all the set time function does is just write the display to the console depending on what the current timer values are. And then similarly for push button 2, if push button 2 is held and pressed, it's going to increment the seconds, and then as well it's just going to call that set time function to update the display for the timer. And then if push button 3 is pressed, it's going to start a T3 interrupt. And so if that push button 3 is held for 3 seconds, what's going to happen is that T3 interrupt is going to trigger, and that's just going to turn the LED off and reset the current timer for that reset functionality. And then alternatively, if PB3 is just pressed but it's released before that 3-second timer elapses, it's just going to implement the pause and resume functionality. So it'll stop the current timer if it's counting down, and if it's not counting down, it'll resume the current timer. So after that, the only thing we have left is this T2 interruption. So this is where the actual countdown is occurring. So this T2 interrupt occurs every second. And so what's happening here is that it's just based on the seconds and minutes values. It's going to update the display on the console. So for instance, if there's only 1 second left when this T2 interrupt is triggered, that's going to be the end of that second. So the alarm's going to go off. It's going to turn the LED on. Alternatively, if there's more than 0 seconds, it's just going to decrement the seconds and then update the display for the new time. And then similarly, if there's minutes left but no seconds left, then it's going to decrement the minute and then set seconds back up to 59 for the next minute. So to illustrate this, I'll just build this, and then I'll open up TerraTerm. So there's our timer as well. I've got an additional timer over here for testing. So just to demonstrate the functionality, so if we hold PB1, which is connected to RA2, it's just going to increment the minutes section of the timer. And then similarly, if we hold PB2, which is connected to pin RA4, it's going to increment the seconds section of the timer. And then if we just quick press PB3, which is connected to RB4, it's going to start the countdown process, and you can see that the LED is flashing on and off on a 1 second delay, so 1 second on, 1 second off. If we push PB3, just quick press again, it'll pause the timer, and then one more time to resume the timer. And then if we press and hold the timer, or PB3, sorry, it'll reset the timer. Right, and then to just demonstrate the precision, I'll just, oops. That's the minutes. Clear that. Set this up here. Okay, and so I'll start that. And so we can see they're in sync with one another. And when it elapses, we get the alarm. All right, thank you very much.